Welcome to the Arizona Early Intervention Program's presentation on changes in procedural safeguards, early intervention records. These changes are the result of new federal requirements for the Individuals with Disabilities Education Act, Part C. This webinar is one in a series created to help Arizona's early intervention community understand and implement the new requirements effective July 1st, 2012. The following are some definitions that would be helpful to keep in mind when listening to the information in this presentation. AZIP Service Providing Agency, also called the agency, are those state agencies that provide service coordination and the other early intervention services under IDEA Part C. Those agencies are the Arizona State Schools for the Deaf and the Blind, ASDB, the Department of Economic Security Arizona Early Intervention Program, DES-AZIP, and the DES Division of Developmental Disabilities, DDD. Destruction. Physical destruction of a record so that personal identifiers are removed. Disclosure. To permit access to or the release, transfer, or other communication of personally identifiable information in early intervention records to any party by any means. Early Intervention Program, EIP, the local program of the AZIP Service Providing Agency providing service coordination and services to a child and family. Early intervention records. Information directly related to a child referred to and are enrolled in AZIP and maintained for the purpose of providing early intervention services. It includes information whether handwritten, printed, electronic, computer data, video, audio, or taped. Personally identifiable information includes but is not limited to the name of the child, child's parent or other family member, address of the child or child's family, personal identifier, such as the child's or parent's social security number, and a list of personal characteristics of other information that would make the child's identity easily traceable. Early intervention records includes all records regarding the child that are required to be collected, maintained, or used under the Individuals with Disabilities Education Act, Part C, such as evaluation reports, assessments, individualized family service plans, including reviews, and other documentation of the provision of early intervention services. Here's what's new with records. Education records are now identified as early intervention records. There are specific timelines and procedures where parents can request to inspect and review early intervention records. Parent may verbally request to inspect and review records. The agency must provide, at no cost to the parents, a copy of each evaluation, assessment of the child, family assessment, and the IFSP within 10 days of completion of the document. It allows representatives of parent to inspect and review records, may presume parent has the authority to inspect and review records unless documentation indicates that the parent does not have the authority. New process for parents to request to amend records, including a request for hearing, and parent may request destruction of records at any time. The AZIP Service Coordinator is responsible for explaining to a parent his or her rights to inspect, review, and have a copy of his or her child's early intervention records. This information is also included in the Family Rights Handbook. A parent's right to inspect and review early intervention records includes the right to a response from the EIP for explanations and interpretations of records, request copies of the early intervention records. If failure to provide copies would prevent parent from right to inspect and review, have a representative of the parent inspect and review the early intervention records. The EIP receiving the parent's request must make records available no more than 10 calendar days after a request to inspect and review records and 14 days after a request for copies of records. The service coordinator sends a parent copies of any evaluation, child assessment, family assessment, and the IFSP, including any reviews within 10 calendar days of the written completion of the document. The AZIP service coordinator or other team members must explain and interpret the early intervention records for the parent upon request. There is no cost to parent for a copy of the evaluation report and the IFSP, including any reviews. Fees may be charged for copying the other early intervention records. Reasonable fees may be charged for copying records other than the evaluation, assessments, which are part of the IFSP, and the entire IFSP, when requested by a parent, as long as the fee does not effectively prevent the parent from exercising his or her right to inspect and retrieve the records. The AZIP Service Coordinator maintains a record of all requests for and disclosure of a child's early intervention records using a record access and release log. A record access and release log is kept in the child's record. The log does not need to include requests to review or access the records when made by the parent, other early intervention team members in the program, or authorized representatives of the DES AZIP office, which oversees the statewide early intervention program. A parent who believes that information in their child's early intervention records is inaccurate, misleading, or violates the privacy or other rights of the child or parent may request that the agency or EIP that maintains the information amend the early intervention record. If a parent wishes to amend a child's early intervention records, the AZIP Service Coordinator lets the parent know that she or he must submit a request in writing that specifies which parts of the child's records the parent wishes to amend. If the parent is unable to make the request in writing, the AZIP Service Coordinator shall assist the parent in making the request in another acceptable means, such as Braille or sign language. Within 14 calendar days of receipt of the written request, the AZIP Service Providing Agency or Early Intervention Program decides if they will amend the child's early intervention records as requested. If the agency agrees to amend the record, it shall amend the child's record. If the agency determines not to amend the record as requested, it will notify the parent of his or her right to request a hearing. If the parent disagrees with the EIP's or the agency's decision not to amend their child's record, the parent may submit a written request for a hearing to DES AZIP within 30 calendar days from the date of the agency's letter of denial, unless an exception is granted by DES AZIP. Upon receipt of the parent's request, DES AZIP will contact the parents to confirm which hearing option they would like, either a hearing facilitated by the DES AZIP Executive Director or his or her designee, or a DES hearing officer. The parent will be provided notice of the date, time, and place reasonably in advance of the hearing. The hearing is then conducted by an impartial individual, either the DES hearing officer or the DES AZIP executive director or designee. This individual is someone who does not have a direct interest in the outcome of the hearing. A decision is made in writing within a reasonable period of time after the hearing. The decision is based solely on the evidence presented at the hearing and must include a summary of the evidence and the reasons for the decision. If the decision is that the record should be amended, DES AZIP will direct the AZIP service coordinator or his or her supervisor to amend the record, substituting the new amended record for the original record. If the decision is that the record should not be amended, the parent will be notified in writing of the parent's right to prepare a statement of disagreement to be kept in the child's record. The AZIP service coordinator maintains the statement in the child's records for as long as the records are maintained per retention policy. If the early intervention records or contested portion are disclosed to any party, the statement must also be disclosed. Early intervention records contain a child's and family's personally identifiable information which is confidential and cannot be shared with others without the parent's written consent. There are some exceptions to this consent requirement, which will be discussed in a later slide. Prior to disclosing information, the AZIP service coordinator ensures the parent knows his or her rights for the protection of their personally identifiable information and obtains a consent by explaining their procedural safeguards and ensuring the family has a copy of the Family Rights Booklet. The AZIP consent to share early intervention information and records is used to obtain consent from a parent when the parent would like records released to someone. This consent is valid for 12 months and may be withdrawn at any time. This AZIP form has not changed and can be found on the AZIP website. The AZIP service coordinator maintains a record of all requests for and disclosure of a child's early intervention record by maintaining a records release and access log in the child's file and by keeping copies of all consents to disclose information in the child's file. The AZIP service providing agency and early intervention programs keep a list of names and position of those people, whether employed, contracted, or volunteering, who have access to a child's personally identifiable information. This list is typically found on the outside of the file cabinet, office, or storage area, where the early intervention records are kept. An AZIP service providing agency or early intervention programs must have an appropriate parental consent in order to provide documents to a law firm or other entities requesting records for a child in early intervention. Exception to consents happen when the automatic referral requirements occur at or near a child's transition from early intervention when the child turns 3 years old. The AZIP service coordinator must share certain personally identifiable information of the child and parent with the school district, unless the parent opts out of this notification. If a child moves and changes early intervention providers, the early intervention records may be sent from one early intervention provider to another provider within Arizona without the parent's consent. A disclosure to DES AZIP staff or its representatives for integrated monitoring activities, including complaint investigation, is an exception to the consent requirement as DES AZIP is undertaking its general supervision and statewide oversight functions. When responding to a court order or subpoena, the AZIP service coordinator must make reasonable effort to notify the parent before sending the records out so that the parent can go to court to stop the request if they would like. The disclosure for health and safety emergency to appropriate authorities must be to protect the immediate health or safety of the child. In general, if a child is in foster care, there is no longer a health or safety emergency unless the police or Child Protective Services have specific concerns with the foster parent's actions. The ASAP Service Coordinator must inform parents when their child's records are going to be destroyed. Around the time the family is transitioning from early intervention, the ASAP Service Coordinator asks the family whether they would like a copy of their child's records. The ASAP Service Coordinator lets parents know that their early intervention records will be kept for 5 years from the date the child exits. Personally identifiable information must be destroyed at the request in writing of the parents. If the parent is unable to make the request in writing, DES ASAP will assist the parent in making a request in an alternative format. A permanent record of a child's name and date of birth, parent contact information, including address and phone number, names of the service coordinators and early intervention service providers, exit data, including year and age upon exit, and the written request to have records destroyed, will be maintained by DES ASAP for 5 years from the date the child exits early intervention. For more information about procedural safeguards, please go to Chapter 7 of the ASAP Policies and Procedures, which can be found on the ASAP website.